I just wanted to say thank you very much for performing this work. It's a real privilege for me to come from New Zealand, 40 hours on the aeroplane, to come here and hear a performance of my work so far from home. It's very special for me, this performance, because my father is here. He's come from Greece, and it's very special for us because as a family we are very separated, and this will be a very important day for us. So thank you very much for this. We really appreciate it. Let's introduce myself from New Zealand.
Hey,
Geoff, how are you?
John Psathis is New Zealand's foremost composer. He's in Berlin for the rehearsal of one of his best-known pieces, View from Olympus. Psathis is the son of Greek immigrants to New Zealand, now living back in Greece. But he and his own family live on the other side of the world, in New Zealand. Embracing classical, jazz, rock and folk, John Psathis is forging a unique voice in world music.
I came here in the summer of 2000. I would sit up here. I remember at this table, I had manuscript and stuff on this table. I did have a big umbrella because it was so hot as well. And I was looking out at Olympus and Aegean and the family downstairs, all the cooking smells and all that sort of stuff. The piece just kind of formed out of it. View from Olympus is the first piece I've written that's overtly Greek sounding. You know, it really embraces Greek rhythms and Greek scales. And that idea of the Greek passion for dance and movement, that ecstatic motion. And I guess just being here and being up here specifically, and with all of that, I kind of felt released from fear, you know, in terms of just going for it with this piece. And something really strong came out of it. This house here has a room that's my room, even if I live to be 100. They call it the patriko, which is the family house. You know, I have two families, essentially. I mean, it's one big family, but it's split geographically. This is my home, you know, and back in Mornington, Wellington is my home. I have two homes, literally two homes. Feels like a ruin. You know, like sort of modern Greek ruins, past glories, I guess.
Psathis achieved a remarkable full circle when he composed the opening and closing music for the Athens Olympics in 2004. John's music was heard by the biggest audience in the world.
My parents, they arrived in New Zealand in 1960 with nothing, you know, with absolutely nothing. They're total outsiders. There was real xenophobia back then. It was, you greasy Greeks, why don't you speak bloody English? You know, there was that whole thing, you know, that we lived through. And for them to see that in the space of one generation, their child can arrive at this point, you know, of making this kind of contribution to such an important event for their home country. It's a testament to what's possible, what you can actually do from one generation to another. And it's hugely motivating and empowering. I'm sure also that they felt, and if they didn't, they should have felt, that all of the sacrifice that they made for their children, that it was worth it. And for me, it felt very much like part of that debt is repaid by being able to give them back something that vindicates so much of their life.
The cultural tensions between his Greek and New Zealand roots may sometimes tear John apart, but they also feed his creative urges.
You say that, life is like a stream, but in fact it's like a raging torrential river, really. For me, the experience is I'm in there and I'm going down it, and all of the stuff that is happening in that river is life. It's everything that happens in life. It's your perception of the world around you, it's your memory, it's your concept of the future, it's all of the things that are exerting force upon you. And what happens if you're an artist is that every now and then you grab hold of a rock and you stop going down that river and you're able to somehow reflect what's been going on. And so I think creating something is an opportunity to output some of that massive amount of input that is going into all of us every day.
John Psathis lives in the Wellington suburb of Brooklyn with his wife Carla and 2 children, Zoe and Emmanuel. His time is spent juggling family life with his many musical projects and teaching at the New Zealand School of Music. When not writing or recording music, John is deeply involved in the performances of his work. Tonight, he'll go out to hear the first rehearsal of his new marimba concerto, featuring the Portuguese virtuoso Pedro Canheiro. Gin will be performed in a series of concerts around New Zealand.
The glamorous side of playing marimba.
First rehearsals can make you want to commit suicide. They can be so bad. It's the first I'll hear of Pedro. It's nice. Yes, that's a G, right? No, it's the G. Yeah, I'll fix it. Usually you get to hear the soloist in advance because they usually want to play it to you and get some feedback. But there's no time for that. They haven't fixed that, that's what it is. I'm more apprehensive than I've been for a long time because this piece, for me, is a real stepping out into different territories. Like, I didn't write for a really big orchestra. I didn't have big sounds and huge percussion and brass and wind. I kept it really austere, the sound world, so that the material had to be strong in order to make the piece work. I want it to be really immediate. I don't want you to have to know a lot about music. All I care about now is this idea of moving people, of sharing and of creating emotion, for people to feel in the music. Music impacts on a deep part of you, an emotional core. That's what music does. That's why we love music, because it does that in a way that nothing else does.
I think if you extend this piece and you played it 3 times slower, they would still have so many notes, on them. It has that kind of childlike excitement that you can cram all these things onto this piece, and this and this and that bit, and then there's this note and this. So this excitement is, is like sparkling water with 8 times the power,
I have the disadvantage where I have to do what I do through others. I have to create the best possible codification of my ideas through notation and then give it to musicians and hope that they will decipher it in a way that produces the result that I'm hoping for, that I want. Mark, I'm here. Yeah. There are two things that have to change. Okay, this is cellos and basses. Letter P, I think it has to be arco, and then it's as written. It's incredible to suggest changes before the performance and not hear them. You know, we're only going to hear them in the performance. The first movement, Pandora, is about Pandora opening the box and releasing all of the vices, all of our bad qualities. But the idea of the movement, which is quite short, is that you have this feeling that something really big is taking place under the surface. So it's like the iceberg. At the tip you can hear, but everything else is really happening under the surface. The second movement, Labyrinth, is about going into a labyrinth and coming out of it changed. So that's the idea of Labyrinth. It's got lots of twists and turns and sort of unexpected corners and sort of dead ends. The third movement, which is called Out Dreaming the Genie, is about being able to dream, and it keeps trying to fly, you know, to kind of be released from gravity, but it keeps crashing, and it has these kind of cataclysmic musical accidents or train wrecks, and the idea is that it keeps trying to defy gravity, and it can't, and then at the very end, of course, it does. There is a happy ending. It does take off. There is that ideal that everything is okay or will be okay. There was a group of people there from the Greek community. To them it sounded like Greek music, and I found that very encouraging, because even though I wasn't trying to write Greek music, it's just now it's part of the DNA. It gives me the confidence to just think, well, I can make these sounds. They're valid sounds, and I'm not contriving them. You know, they're coming out of me naturally.
John has worked closely with Greek folk musicians who have pushed him to explore new worlds of sound and rhythm. This culminated in Zebekiko, celebrating 2,000 years of Greek music.
I struggle with this idea that things are separate. I'm not a classical composer. I'm a 21st century person, and I'm surrounded by all of the world's music now. You know, the world is my country. And what that means is that for me, music is not a string quartet.
Very famous Greek thing called ratza. In the morning for breakfast, seen this guy? Can you see this guy here with the no shirt and the helmet on the back of his head? You know, so he's taken the helmet because it's legally he has to, but he's not wearing it on his head.
In Athens, he's meeting one of the world's foremost exponents of the traditional Greek clarinet, Manos Akallinatopoulos. They're planning for a new performance of Zabikiko in New Zealand.
Okay. Manos, it's interesting because I see him once every 4 years or so, and we have these installments, you know, where our sort of relationship becomes updated, and we hear about each other's news and talk about projects and so on. It feels like the contemporary classical world is in some ways a contrived musical world, and with the folk musicians that I'm meeting here and hopefully working with in the future and so on, these traditions, they are born, you know, they're born of the earth, culture, society, in I think a different way. So for me, the experiences I have with these musicians is a gradual process of firstly being accepted by them, because that acceptance, you can't demand it, you can't buy it, you know, you can't even negotiate it. You just have to wait for it. You have to be yourself. I can immerse a part of myself into it and have relationships with people that are very empowering for me and give me confidence and a different kind of depth that I absorb from them. And I take some of the musical philosophy that underlies what Manos does. In order for me to not just be magpie taking things, you have to go down into the DNA level of what he does. And you can't do that without applying yourself to it for years, so that you absorb it and it becomes part of you. It can't happen on the surface.
Φιλιά σε όλους, φιλιά πολλά.
John is also meeting Sofia Labropoulou, who plays a rare traditional instrument, the kunun. It's an exciting moment for John, as this is the first time he'll hear this instrument played live. He's hoping to write a piece of music especially for Sofia.
What amazes me about Manos, and it was the same with Sofia, is the way that they just instantly are on when they play. There's no sort of finding it, it's just always there. And I've been profoundly changed by that. I advocate to most of my students to not aim to end up in a university, but to be out in the world engaging with humanity and audiences and people with their music. I say to all of my students there, don't write for other composers. They are not going to give you the nourishment you need as an audience. You need to go out and be part of the world and write music and develop an audience and have this symbiotic, productive, fruitful relationship with other human beings through the creation of music. But you know, the knocks are so hard, you know, when you get knocked back in this kind of pursuit, that, you know, I really feel for them. I have a lot of emotional investment in them, and I really want them to succeed and go forth and do well. You need to have a very developed musicianship. You need to know about as much music as you can possibly absorb. You need to explore. You have to love it. If you don't love it deeply, if you don't find a new artist and deeply fall in love with their music on a regular basis, then you might not have the stamina to survive all the hard stuff, because it's that deep love of it and the experience that music gives you that sustains you through all of it. You know, the fact that it's possible to create that totally unique experience that music gives you, you know, in the best way. You know, we went through that avant-garde thing of hyper-complex, writing it all down, and new things you could do with notation that would create new sounds and all that. But I think what's happening now, I see it a lot in students, is this trying to reclaim live energy in performance, so that the music actually, it speaks in performance to whoever's listening in a very human, visceral kind of way, and it's not quite so abstract. And being able to use materials that are like tonal, you know, that are in a key, they have a center, and feeling all right about that, so that we no longer have that huge guilt that used to come with writing tonally, which when I was a student, it was like a sin, you know, it was forbidden. On here there's Maitra's Dance, and it's an early piece of mine, and it was me playing the piano here.
He came as a student of mine, and it was very exciting because he obviously had a tremendous talent. But I think it was in his last year I arranged a series of commissions for recent graduates, and we had a concert or series of concerts of these pieces. And John wrote the Maitra's Dance. That was a key piece, and it was explosive. We'd never heard anything like that before. It was something new from him. It was like an explosion, and that really showed that he was a force to be taken account of.
Maitra's Dance was quickly picked up by renowned percussionist Evelyn Glennie, and this helped launch John's international profile.
I thought Jack was from another planet when I first met him, because I'd come from a kind of conservative classical music upbringing, and Jack was just throwing all of these incredibly challenging concepts at us in our first year, and we were just staring at him in this kind of amazement, like, what is he talking about? When I was a student, I wrote a piece called Waiting for the Aeroplane. I was a master's student, and this piece actually has a life. It's still around, which is not that common for like a student piece. Usually they disappear, you know. And it's got this oscillating interval in it on the piano. You play a kind of fourth between two notes, and it goes all the way through the piece. Jack said, look, that fourth, I said, don't you want to change it? Don't you want to make it like a fifth or an augmented fourth or something else? And I resisted because, you know, I resisted. Waiting for the Aeroplane. This has a special significance for me because I wrote that when my parents left.
In 1988, after many years in New Zealand, John's parents and sister Tanya decided to return to Greece permanently, throwing John's world into turmoil.
Dad said, that's it, we were off, but I happened to be a student at university at that point. I went from being part of this very tight family unit to being totally isolated.
He just made the decision that the family's going back. And I went first, and then they followed, and then, because John had his studies, stayed.
I remember this bus ride with my mother going into Thessaloniki from Mekanyona and telling her that I probably wasn't going to come and live in Greece. And she said, you've killed me. You've just killed me. You know, how am I going to survive you not coming back here? So I've also had that to live with, you know, that sense of guilt about not having come back here. And even though they left New Zealand and came here, in essence, I'm the one that split the family up because I didn't come over the way that I was supposed to.
I have rewritten that Waiting for the Aeroplane a quarter of a century later, and it's still got that oscillating interval, but other things happen to it now. It's much more elastic than it was back then. That's a kind of tribute to Jack, and also I've combined that piece, which is a kind of meeting point for me and Jack, with gamelan, which is something that Jack has the most incredible passion for and has always been trying to get me into, but I've always resisted. So if I play one on its own, it's a pure flat tone. But if I play it with its partner, you get that wah, 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 wah effect. And I didn't realise when I started writing the piece that you only play these instruments together. You have to play the male and the female part at the same time so that you get that beating, and that is the sound. The sound is not one or the other, it's actually both of them. And I think it's amazing. I find that an amazing concept.
A composer, obviously, at the beginning, always learning by imitating other composers. But no composer should end up imitating themselves, meaning that you should never be writing the same piece, that there should always be something new, some new frontier, some new area you're discovering with each piece. And that's definitely true of John.
Wait. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, go.
I've been thinking about a lot is this idea of space in music in a personal way. The problem is that I still have too much energy to do that all the time. And I've become known for writing really rhythmic, driving music, you know, and really exciting, and it's got a lot of momentum in it. And I've just finished this marimba concerto in which the last movement is mad. It's so fast and there's so many notes and it's so exciting. And that's me getting wrapped up in that, and I get taken with it, and I have to follow that through.
Not long after the family returned to Greece, John met fellow student Carla in Wellington.
He moved in as a flatmate, that's how we sort of met. And he wrote a piece called Shocked Awake, which is an incredible piece. I don't think it'll ever be played, actually. And he sequenced it on an MC500, which was this little box that played musical notes. When he first played it to me, I thought, my God, it's, you know, it was really crazy. And I just thought, man, he's really different. Yeah. So I think he is unique.
No, it's a solo piano piece, and no one can play a page of it. You know, it's beyond human capability. And I was there writing it, going, oh, this is pretty good. My thyroid was completely overactive. A hyperactive thyroid means you've got a hyperactive metabolism. And I was writing music that was just like insanely energetic. You know, you think it's kind of busy now. What I really hope is that maybe I'll write something that I can play, you know, myself one day, because I can't play any of the music I've written. That's great. I was just reading about a concert where they gave the audience gifts in boxes. Oh, yeah? And every box had a clock alarm in it.
I know, that's a great idea.
No, and throughout the concert, all the alarms started going off.
That's a great idea.
No, they didn't mean it.
It's part of the piece.
No, they didn't mean it. Yes, it's a very good idea if you meant it.
Hey, that's a great idea for a piece, isn't it?
It'd be just like going to a concert in Greece. Carla and I, we laugh a lot. Still, we laugh after all of the crap you go through, you know, through sort of adulthood and having kids and mortgages and all the things, you know, the disappointments, all those things that happen. We still can laugh a lot together. We're always looking for ways to be together and have fun together. That's my microphone. So don't tap it, it's fake. It'll be going.
He's really fun and he's not like really serious, he's quite silly.
See?
Yeah.
I'm getting into like dubstep and drum and bass. You know, my dad gets me music, like he finds music that I'm into and you know, gets it for me, which is pretty cool.
John grew up in the central North Island town of Taumaranui. The family lived above their fish and chip shop, the Golden Kiwi.
Mum and Dad left Greece like late 50s, early 60s, and it was a terrible time, civil war, you know, all of these things going on. But anyway, they came to New Zealand with absolutely nothing, you know, empty suitcases with debt. Here it is, it's now called the Hong Kong fast food. That used to be the Golden Kiwi restaurant. It would have been like going to another planet. I think for my sister and I, the thing that we got out of being here, especially at the school, we basically had it hammered into us that we were different. You know, that we weren't part of this place or this country or this culture, that we were foreigners, real foreigners. When I was 5 and I went to piano lessons, and after a few weeks the piano teacher phoned my dad and she said, you're wasting your money and my time. Take this boy away from me. I don't want to teach him. You know, because I wasn't interested.
When John Psathas was 8, the family relocated to Napier. It was here that his love of music really emerged.
I think the only person that probably had an influence on me was my sister. She was a really eclectic listener. She was into Alan Parsons. He was a really unusual composer. There's a track of Alan Parsons called Lucifer, and before I was old enough to work in the shop, I would put that on the stereo and turn it up to 10 so that everything was distorting, you know, it was too loud. And I would stand on this chair and I would conduct it like this, you know, really get into the music. I would leap off the chair and run around the room. And, you know, this was like when I was even younger, like when I was about 9 or 10. And, you know, sometimes the neighbours would come and knock on the door and they would see through the curtain my shadow, jumping up and down and waving my arms, this sort of mad young boy at home alone listening to this music. You know, I really had fantastic experiences with music.
I always said he was the fastest beginner I ever taught. But if it didn't come to him very easily, he actually didn't work all that well. and he had to be pushed along. What was next? With the motor mower? It was lawnmower or something?
Yeah, push mower.
Push mower, yes. And he took the top off his finger, and it was repaired in some way or other. But the problem was he couldn't get it between the black notes. And so all the time, John had to adjust his fingering so that it would, he could get in there between the black notes. So he had an operation, had it trimmed so that he was able to fit it between the black notes. Then went off to the university and auditioned to get into Victoria University as a piano student, and no one noticed.
No. I remember Dad telling me when I went to the audition, he said, keep your hand in your pocket afterwards, which I did. And I remember going to my first lesson as a university student, and my piano teacher there seeing my hand and going, what? When she saw there was a bit missing from one of the fingers.
By now, the family business was thriving, and John joined his parents and sister working in their new restaurant.
One of the things about being immigrants is that you have a fear of culture, because you don't know the culture. And a way of dealing with that is to keep your family close, have your kids with you at work, and of course if you're there, you're going to end up working. So my sister and I, we worked in the shop. We used to work till 1, 2 in the morning, and then actually have to clean, so you get home even later. We had to go to school the day after, and we had to do really well at school. We had no excuses. We just accepted it.
There was no social life. I was a teenager that never, ever got to go out. And worse than that, all of my mates would come in and order burgers that I would cook and give to them to take out. I survived my adolescence by going inward and building a kind of impenetrable wall, which was horrendous for my mother, who really needed our affection and our love. And that was a way of dealing with an impossible kind of adolescence. It was so unnatural being imprisoned in the family business, which is the only way of saying that.
John has been commissioned to write a new work for solo piano. Again, this will be a chance to explore new territory in his music.
The piano piece is going to be a real breakaway for me, because what I'm planning to do is very accessible. The first idea that I'm working with is just a left-hand pattern in the piano, which is this just that. And I'm sort of trying to figure out a melody, and I've put some other sort of percussion loops that go with it. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write a karaoke piece, which is it's going to be for a solo pianist and pre-recorded stuff. So there'll be a CD, basically just press play. It's actually going to be piano pieces. I'm going to do 3 short ones, I think.
I'll spend a really long time doing this. Just getting to that. There will have been, 50 different versions of that before I say, well, that's the best one. So instead of being, it might have been. I don't think I'm capable of leaving it at the door. In fact, I don't think I'm capable of leaving it on the pillow when I go to bed. It's there all the time. If I wake up at like 3 in the morning, it's still tuning. What I'll do then is start trying them in different combinations and different orders, because sometimes one wants to follow another, So it might be, oh, hang on. And then I'll figure out that the next best thing is this. So there's like a question and an answer. There's this phrase that I've had going through my head. It's like 1.5 seconds worth of music, and I cannot be free of it because I need to know what the other 0.5 of the second is of that bar. I need to know, I have to know. This morning I spent at least 2 hours trying to figure out this timbale phrase. Just that. Just figuring that out. And it's still not right. You know, I know I still have to work on it. And then at some point, it's like it suddenly, the resistance of the work breaks, and then it gushes forwards. And then it's like, oh God, how do I keep up with it? I can't keep up with what's coming out. And it's like this race to stay on with the piece as it unfolds. Because if you miss anything, it could be the most golden opportunity in that piece and you weren't paying attention. I had a big breakthrough this morning, and it's arriving at the next step in the piece, and it emerges out of the fog, you know. I've got this electric guitar in here, just in the background, emphasising some of the piano bass notes. This is the sound. I'll just play it on its own. If I put that with the piano, you probably won't hear it, but it's definitely adding to what's going on. So it's just there, emphasising a low note in the piano. And I'm now thinking about other places where I could have that guitar note in there. There's one that I think I've located, but you know, I think about this for ages. Should I put it in? Shouldn't I put it in? You know, am I indulging? Am I not showing restraint? You know, all that sort of stuff. And I think that the natural state of music, as soon as it starts, is it loses energy. And so much of what you do is like injecting air into a balloon to stop it from going flat. It sounds like there's a beat all the way through. It's quite settled on a beat and a pulse. But I take beats out or half beats, I add things in a way that you don't really notice. But what it does is it keeps it alive, because once it settles, the energy starts to dissipate out of it. And my thing is to try and accumulate energy. How do I have a good relationship with my kids and do the thing that I do, which is totally obsessive and compulsive? How do I retain a positive relationship with my wife? What are these obstacles I have to overcome so that I can still be free to write the way that I want to write? One of those obstacles, is it supporting a family? All right, I'll work at a university so that I could still sit in here on my own for hours on end, writing music the way I want to write it.
There's always that guilt, you see, when he's composing that he hasn't got enough time to spend with the family. So there's all that goes into it. You know, there's the time pressure and the guilt and the stress. Yeah, that doesn't sound very good, does it?
After a long flight, John's parents arrive in New Zealand for a much-anticipated Christmas visit. But his mother's health has deteriorated.
My parents came for a visit. We try to get together as often as we can. Collectively, we've spent a fortune being together since they left this country. They had an extremely difficult trip coming over here. In fact, my mother had to be taken off the plane in Singapore in a wheelchair with doctors and attendants, you know, because they couldn't wake her. They thought she'd gone into a coma. You know, there were all kinds of things that went wrong on the way here. My mother's Alzheimer's is advancing quite rapidly, and I'd never seen my father quite so traumatised when they arrived. They've basically been pushed into a corner now. Ultimately, my father has to decide whether they're going to go back to Greece. It'll be the last long-distance trip they ever make, or whether they decide to stay here. I'm about to have, at some point in the next week, a conversation with Dad about this very thing, and Carla and I are basically putting together what amounts to an offer of help for them. And I'm going to suggest to Dad that once my sister arrives, he and I go back to Greece and sort out their stuff and get it all over here. And, they would have a place of their own. Dad can still drive. We can sort a life out for them here that would be much better from my point of view. But it's not my decision.
It's something, that you can't really explain why. When you get older, you always like to go where you've been born, like the elephants, to die in the birthplace.
My mum's really feeling the cold at the moment. Well, I don't think that what I do is within his vocabulary of manliness sort of things, because I think that it's sort of defined in terms of material success, physical prowess, and things like that. And neither of those are particularly featured in the career of a composer.
We have some serious health problems. And New Zealand is the best country, we have support, from everywhere. When Greece is exactly the opposite, you have support from nowhere. I feel like I am in a crossroad, you don't know which way to take, because I must decide, I can't leave it. We'll see. We have another month to think.
Yeah.
I've been coming in here at about 7 in the morning, trying to get a couple of hours. Basically, it's the guilt meter. Once the guilt gets too high, when I'm aware of all these people in the house that are essentially waiting for me to come in and be a part of their day. So that's that sort of stuff. Once that sort of builds up enough, then I stop, because I stop being able to concentrate. I don't know anything that's as frustrating as really needing to work on something and not being able to work on it. And the thing about times like this is that it doesn't take much to derail emotionally. When you sit down to work, you can't focus properly. There's just no time, there's no time to work. And the thing is that, the creative unfolding of the music happens. It happens once it starts. You can't stop it.
Last night, John's father decided to return to Greece for good.
I think if Dad could, he would have gone back last night. All these things came up last night, and I kept telling him that they were excuses for doing what he'd already decided. And one of them is, one person decides and one person bears the brunt of that responsibility. Whether it's right or wrong, they have to live with it and all that sort of thing, which was exactly what was going on when they made the decision to go back to Greece back in 1988. It wasn't a consultation, it wasn't a democratic decision, it was autocratic. My dad is pretty committed to going back to Greece, even though he admits it's not the right thing to do, but it's what will make my mother happy. But I think it's a terrible mistake. It feels to me like I'm always on the verge of tears with my mother, you know, and this has been the feeling that I've had since they left in 1988. You know, my parents leaving this time was the hardest. It's always been really hard, but this was the hardest. Hardest because my mother's probably not going to ever come back to New Zealand. You know, so I'm going to go over in June. That's what drives me to create the projects that generate opportunities so that I can see my family again.
With his parents back in Greece, John throws himself into a busy schedule of work.
I've been offered a film score, you know, and I've wanted to try that for ages. No, I got to see it, and I liked it a lot, and I thought that, you know, I could do something good for it. And look at the cuts. Really big orchestra there for the posse. And big for the landscape here, really big for the landscape. Big, huge build-up. And then you'd cut it off here.
John has an ongoing role as composer-in-residence with the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra. This sees him mentoring young musicians from both classical and popular backgrounds.
This is the Auckland Philharmonia's remix project, and essentially it's bringing together young people who are creating pieces of music with hip-hop artists and classical mentors like myself, and there are musicians that come in from the Auckland Philharmonia to play on the tracks that they're creating. So should we do the stabs like that and you can fix the drums? It's all about creativity, finding a voice, finding expression.
In Wellington, the film score has become a major undertaking, including recording with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra.
There's about 80 minutes or 82 minutes worth of music, and I think the film is about 82 minutes long, so I think there's music all the way through. Hamish, can I please just hear the first violins playing that bar 30? Could they play it tasto? In a serious art, classical music world, film composers are thought of as second rate. I listen to them in the same way that I listen to any other composer because they are brilliant composers. There are pieces of music in the film score so far that are pieces of music that you could put on at a concert. People would feel they were standalone compositions.
John is also the special guest at a concert of Greek music in Auckland, where the New Zealand trio play his original version of View from Olympus. Part of John's aim is to push his own musical experience into new popular territory. He's working closely with rock and jazz musician Warren Maxwell and band The Little Bushmen, devising orchestrations for a live concert with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra.
I feel the best when people are struggling to find a label. That's what I want to be involved in. In my background, there's a whole lot of like rock music and jazz and all that stuff. When you hear jazz, you hear so much of what's in rock, what's in folk music. You hear, in jazz as well, and classical structures and so on. There's so much in common between so many kinds of music that I guess that's what some of us do, is we look for what things have in common, and other people look for what makes things different. I'm always fascinated at the cultural divide between the musical styles and genres, and often one side of it is really keen to connect and to engage, and the other side is not so interested. It's more like a job or something like that.
The goal for me in doing the Little Bushman arrangements was to not limit those 4 players that are incredibly spontaneous. So what I did was I decided that I would turn Hamish, the conductor, into a 5th member of the band. And so he had in his score these strategies that I had developed for him. So the orchestra had, for instance, loops, things that they had to keep playing over and over again once they were triggered by the conductor. And the conductor would decide when to trigger them according to what he was hearing happening in the band.
Completely wrong at this point, because they've moved on to here, because they counted 8, and these guys are still not even halfway through their solos here. Yeah. They're going to stop in a second.
But Hamish, the thing is that after the 8th time through that, they should just loop until it's finished, so there should be no kind of constraint on the solos.
Basically what Hamish was doing was triggering layer after layer after layer in the orchestra and building up a texture in parallel with this improvisation that was happening in the Bushmen.
An orchestra, it's got that powerful thing about it, and when you combine that with, I guess, the raw energy of a psychedelic rock or blues band or blues influence, it's just, double.
You did some stuff at the beginning, which was you left some space, between some phrases.
Yeah, right.
And once it had got going, and the orchestra kind of came through a bit. It was quite nice.
So leave some.
I think just in the first sort of quarter of it.
Yep.
But then it needs to become continuous.
Fill it up.
Yeah, but it was quite nice because there's stuff happening behind,
These gigs for me are really special because I get to stand behind the audience, and I feel the kind of vibe of the crowd. It's not like a classical concert where you just never know, you can't read the crowd. But here there's this kind of seething energy coming out of the crowd. I guess that's what I got into the music thing for in the first place. Ultimately, I wish I was on stage with them, and playing with them and sharing that amazing experience. But that's not my life, it's not my role, it's not what I do. And I really, really loved it, but I was outside of it. I wasn't inside that experience. And that's kind of the role, that's the life, that's this kind of life. It's really being isolated or outside. My whole drive, if you look at everything that I've done, apart from marrying Carla and having kids in New Zealand, everything I've done has come out of an energy to find ways to see my family here. I feel like an exile. You know, I feel like I've emigrated to New Zealand, like I've left behind something. You know, it's the most bizarre double brain space to live in. I'm going into Volos, which is where we'll see Dino Mastroiannis, the pianist. I haven't met Dino, but we've had fantastic email correspondence. Dino is a Greek pianist in the process of creating a CD of Greek composers' piano music, and he's been playing my Waiting for the Airplane quite a bit, which always has a special significance for me. Every time I come to Greece, every single time there's a sense of awakening. You know, there's things waking up in me that are there, that are very dormant in New Zealand because there's nothing to trigger them there. Mixing with those musicians, there is a musical DNA, there is a part of you, that's hardwired, I think, musically, and activates musical things inside of me that will never wake up if I'm only in New Zealand. This is the church where Mum used to come and pray whenever I had something happening. She would come and pray that everything would go well. It's called St. John's Church. And whenever things went well, it was because of that. Yeah. All of my relatives are here. And I have a lot of them. I mean, they've passed away, some of them, but my mother had brother and sister. My dad had 3 brothers here and 1 in Athens. And they've all had kids, grandchildren. I've got a lot of cousins. I'm certain if I lived here, if I had have come here with my parents, that I would be a totally different person. I think I would have probably quite a different set of values and aspirations and goals. I might have had a lot more fun, but I wouldn't have achieved as much. So, everybody's got to figure out what they think is more valuable. The thing about being in New Zealand without my family was that I had no choice but to become my own person, and I had to figure out my position, in culture and art and society, friendships, family. I had to think about all of that and invent myself, create myself. Look, these are the city walls. Whenever I come here, because when you go from one country to another, you have to mentally exit one country and then enter the other. And that sometimes doesn't happen at the same time as your physical exit and entrance of these 2 countries. And there's a stretch of road which is from Thessaloniki. And I know that road really well because I've travelled it so many times. When I do that drive, there is this shedding of the New Zealand thing. And there's a very powerful sense of arrival. It's a very important experience for me every time. First thing we usually do is eat, and eat a lot so that we get back into that whole routine of overeating. And, we'll talk, we'll catch up and just enjoy being around each other. Mum is sort of unrecognisable here compared to how she was in New Zealand. In New Zealand, she was totally disoriented. She had no idea of where she was, often of who she was. You can just see the difference, you know, she knows where everything is. It's undoubted that this is the best place for my mother.
Oh, I feel a lot better. She feels better because that trip to New Zealand, the last 5 months, was really, you know, tough trip. We had a lot of problems. And I've seen my wife, she feels a lot happier here. I mean, she feels more secure here. And I feel better because it's my house.
What I saw when I went to Greece was that Dad, who just had a triple bypass, wasn't able to get exercise because he was giving full-time care to Mum. And so the only solution I could think of was to get Dad a walker in the house so that he could actually do his exercise that he needed for his own health while Mum was sitting there watching him. You know, so he could look after Mum, keep her entertained and do his exercise all at the same time. And it's turned out to be a fantastic thing for him. So as long as it's calm, Mum is at her absolute peak of awareness and understanding of what's going on. So it makes perfect sense that they came back now. It makes perfect sense. And the only way for me to understand that is to have come here and seen them here in the house. One of the reasons that I'm here now is to take Dad to Germany, because the sacrifices that he and Mum made for Tanya and I are extreme. And for me, this is just one minor opportunity to pay that back.
There's a Greek proverb about when your son gets older, you make your son your brother. And that's the kind of thing that's happening with Dad and I, is that we're becoming more like brothers.
But this is his opportunity to share, you know, and to kind of reap the reward of having made that sacrifice.
That's when you know this piece is work, you know, when people shout, that's when you know the energy's really been transferred. When I was writing this piece, this is what I imagined. Intense energy coming off the stage that you can't resist, you know, you want to, I felt like getting up and shouting and jumping around leading up to the end of the third movement. I just had this sort of amazing experience of having to restrain myself. And that's because they were you know, getting it, they were really selling it, and they were totally into it. And they were on a runaway train, they had to hang on and just go with the whole thing.
What keeps me in New Zealand is my family here. But also what keeps me here is an awareness that I have a lot more freedom here, both creatively and in my daily life, than I think I would have anywhere else. But I'm in a situation here where I can put the time in, I can explore, I can struggle with it all and come out of it feeling like I achieved something.